You guys really got to get down with that 1, 2, 3, 4, not just 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, is it really that much difference? It's just like a little syncopate. Like, come on, like throws both of you into like a weird dead zone.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. It is the first listography video of 2023, and we are kicking things off with a Patreon selection. And the kind people over, the kind supporters of this channel have elected Bob Marley to be the first of the year. So that's what we're doing. If you've watched a lot of this channel in the past, you may have heard me express my distaste for reggae music in the past. So we will see how this went for me.
You think Bob Marley's reggae? I didn't think this week was reggae.
I mean, I guess it's debatable.
No, it's reggae. I was being ironic. This is some friggin' reggae music.
Yeah. So I've mentioned and told this story before, but I worked in a music store. The manager of that store, her favorite artist was Bob Marley, and I heard Bob Marley all the time for 7 years or so that I worked with her. So I have never really sat down and listened to a Bob Marley album, but I would say I was familiar with probably 75% or more of the catalog. So how about you guys going into this? How much did you know? Anything besides the couple hits?
No, I had a friend that burned me some discs. It was all Bob Marley stuff. Don't know where it all came from, but so probably knew 30, 40 songs, but never listened to a full album. But we did, your first time watching the channel, we did listen to every one of these albums before we start talking about it in this video. Morons.
I somehow always overlooked Marley, other than Legend. That's pretty much all I knew. I actually had the Wailing Wailers, the very first CD. My mom bought it for me for some reason, and I maybe that turned me off because like this is Bob Marley. Like, I'm, this isn't that great. So, other than Legend, somehow I only knew that and Wailing Wailers. So, a very skewed perspective of Bob Marley.
And Jason doesn't even smoke pot. So this like you have no business reviewing this.
I'm way out of my wheelhouse here. And I guess we can get into it. There's 13 studio albums. A couple of these pretty flimsy definition of what we usually consider a studio album on this channel. So we did them all anyways, and I suffered through even more for you fine folks. So we're going to go through the bottom 3 quickly and then get into the top 10 one at a time. So who's kicking it off? Should I start? My least favorite, number 13. It's the Wailing Wailers, the debut. If you'd even call it a debut, it's really just a compilation of early recordings, singles. Came out in 65. So going way back with this one. They were called Jamaica's top-rated singing sensations. There's a bunch of covers on it. There's like a William Bell track. They do What's New Pussycat, a song by the Moonglows. It's not really even entirely that far removed from American music of the 50s and 60s. Musically, I don't mind it at all. And I'd say it's probably closer to like ska than reggae. But the production quality varies greatly from track to track, being that they were all recorded at different times. Some of this stuff here is like demo quality, and some of it is like radio ready. There's so much noise and hiss on When the Well Runs Dry. But then you get something like 10 Commandments of Love, which sounds like a good 50s recording, even though it's from the 60s. I don't know. I think it's an interesting piece of their development, but I think it's probably best reserved for the diehard fans, which I am not. So just 2 stars for the Wailing Wailers. Not going lower than 2, so it's not going to be a bloodbath as maybe some predicted. Up from there, number 12, I've got Soul Rebels. And I'm just going to say it. I hate the sound of the Lee Scratch Perry albums. The bass is so heavy. It's so fat. It's so loud and overbearing. It completely drowns out everything else. I think it makes the records almost unlistenable. Bob sounds good. I think, between the 65 record and this one coming out in 70, he developed a much stronger voice, a more distinct and identifiable sound, which is good. The James Brown penned My Cup is probably the highlight on this record. Cornerstone, I think, is decent too. But the melody, I think, is almost completely reused later for the song Time Will Tell. But yeah, the bass kills this record for me. And there's not enough happening to kind of overcome that or make me more interested in it. It's just almost headache inducing. Up from there, number 11, I've got the other Lee Scratch Perry produced record, Soul Revolution Part 2. The bass on this record is still out of control here, but everything else around it sounds a lot better. I think the vocals are mixed better. I think the songs are a little stronger. Don't Rock My Boat, I think, has a pretty good melody, which was reworked later. A bunch of these songs, actually, I think there's 3 or 4 from this record that were reworked for the Kaya record. But I think those songs are actually pretty decent here. I think they're better on Kaya, but they're okay here. You've got African Urban, which was written by Richie Havens, which I think has some nice vocal contributions from the other Wailers on it. I think it's a pretty big improvement from the first 2 records, but still not great. And I think Perry's production really, really gets in the way of the somewhat improved songwriting here. So 2.5 for that one. I don't know if I said or not. Soul Rebels was just 2. So 2 2s at the bottom and then a step up to 2.5.
All right. I would like to go next, Joe, unless you... Thank you. I would like to go next because I have the exact same situation as Jason. I've got the first 3 albums, 13, 12, and 11. 2 stars, my number 13 for the Wailing Wailers. I don't think it's very good, although I do think, like Jason said, it's an interesting piece of their history and completely unexpected. I didn't even know they had this sort of old school, almost like doo-wop version in them, thrown together as a debut from previously recorded material, like you said, and it is a little bit charming. However, I do think even for 1965 or 63, 62, whenever these were actually recorded, it still feels kind of raw. Like Jason was saying, like it sounds good for the 50s, but mid 60s, it's kind of lacking a little bit. Like I said, got a little bit of like a beachy doo-wop feel at times, I think. I like I Need You quite a bit. I think the piano's cool, giving it some tropical flavor. Lonesome feeling, boogies a bit. Same kind of ska horns going on in a lot of songs. 10 Commandments, I think, is the best track on it. It's a nice little ballad. But there's no one really has room to shine. The message isn't there. The peace, love, and happiness is not really anywhere. What's New Pussycat? Don't really need to hear that any version of that song ever. Nothing remarkable. Number 12, I've got Soul Rebels. I've got that at 2.5. I think it's decent. Getting some more flavor in the reggae department, more what you'd expect. Got that cool, chill, carefree flair, but speaking some really nice vibes. It's All Right is cool. The Caribbean feel is pretty apparent. Some cool little guitar work here and there, but not really my jam. It doesn't really have like a nice bombastic, like dramatic quality to it like the later stuff will have. It's mostly about the feel and the lyrics and the sensitivity, but the feel never really changes, and the musicality of it is just so repetitive and predictable. I do like My Cup quite a lot. I think it's really beautiful when he's singing about losing the best friends he'd ever had. Soul Almighty is pretty good. And then number 11, I've got Soul Revolution Part 2 as well. I've got it at 2.5. The harmonies are starting to come along nicely on this album, and the singing overall, I think, is starting to get a little bit better and really taking over kind of that identity with the vocals. Don't Rock My Boat is okay, but again, everything is pretty indistinguishable from one another. Put It On is really cool. I like the higher vocal range, and I like the more rolling, more sporadic drum parts. I do like the preaching side of a lot of this stuff, and like fussing and fighting, saying that we should learn to love one another. That's what Bob Marley's all about, and you get it. I think that the message is so positive and simply done that when it works, it's a big part of like everyone's emotional Bible that you have to have. But musically, even like artistically at times, it's just kind of like, Memphis with the accordion is probably the most pleasant song in the album, and Kaya is nice. It's a very relaxing, breezy album, but again, it's not stuff I would really seek out. So just 2.5. These albums and reggae in general for me are just kind of like a different animal. It's not something that I look to listen to music academically or emotionally or spiritually. It's more of like a mood influencer. Like I almost barely think of it in the same realm as most of the music we listen to. It's almost like medicine. Like, hey, I'm like, or geographical. Like I'm on the beach, I can go for Bob Marley. Or like, dude, I've had a shit day. I need like a little pick me up. 15 minutes of Bob Marley will do it with a joint, and but Is it some of like my favorite music ever? No.
You smoking them spliffs, those big spliffs.
We have Swisher Sweets, half weed, half sweet, baby.
Um, all right, we're basically all on the same page here. I got the Wailing Wailers at the bottom. It's not, I mean, it doesn't sound like Bob Marley and the Wailers. It's almost a completely different genre. It's not really reggae, it's pre-reggae. It's almost just like R&B, but the recordings, kind of let it down. I think there's some interesting stuff, and I think they could have been a pretty good vocal group, but yeah, the lo-fi stuff and like the cover of What's Up Pussycat is maybe the most bizarre thing I think I've heard, like doing Taste Like Music. It's just like, what? Like it's so weird coming from like them singing it on this album from 1965. So 2.5 stars for me for the Wailing Wailers. My number 12 is going to be Soul Rebels, and I agree with you guys again. I think the production just isn't crisp enough, especially when compared to like the later stuff where the production is just like immaculate. Here, Lee Scratch Perry's stuff, the bass just doesn't work, and I like the cover of My Cup, but like the bass in that is so like loud and like high up. It's just really weird. Like the whole mix is off. But you got some good songs. I do like No Sympathy a lot. It's the one that Peter Tosh wrote and sings. He has a smoother voice, a little Motowny. 400 Years is another good one, but it's just, it's lacking the variety. There's no horns. It's pretty much, bass, guitar, drums, little organ, and some vocals. So it's just a little sparse for my taste. And my 11 is going to be a little different. I got The Best of the Wailers at my number 11 from 71. It was recorded in 1970. And this one has some decent tracks. The vocals are a lot better. This one's produced by Leslie Kong. So I think the production's probably a little bit better than Soul Revolution Part 2, which would come, I guess that was before this, but with Lee Scratch Perry. So they go to a different producer, a little smoother. I really like Caution, got the like spaghetti western guitar intro, good skulk to it. And Peter Tosh's Stop the Train, also really strong. He has 3 tracks on this one, so he gets a little more into the songwriting. And it's good. I have it up to 3.5 stars. Soul Rebels, I only have it 3. So 2.5, 3 for Soul Rebels, 3.5 for The Best of the Wailers. It's pretty cool. They're starting to add more stuff. They feel more united as a band, and a little more room for them to explore new sounds and just kind of expand what they're offering. But again, it's not quite what I'm looking for in Bob Marley. Yeah, I like that lusher later stuff when it all comes together and you have the clavinet and the organ and the keys and there's all this stuff going on. This one just a little I don't know, too rudimentary for my taste, but better. It's definitely getting better. So yeah.
Into the top 10 now, and I will kick off my top 10 with the final album, the posthumous album, Confrontation from 1983. Again, this is one that doesn't really fit our definition of what a studio record normally is. We have counted posthumous records before, but usually it's when like an artist dies in the process of making a record. And this is just kind of pulled from existing demos and a variety of places. It wasn't like intended to be a record, it doesn't seem. So kind of like the Wailing Wailers, I think the production on this one varies quite a bit from track to track. Some of it's not bad. At other times you get like cheesy synths and keys and stuff. I think the tracks that were less finished that people did after he had passed away and like worked on them without him, I think those ones, I'm guessing, are the ones that turned out a little cheesier sounding, a little too much reverb. I know, especially as the track that I think is pretty corny sounding. This record does give you Buffalo Soldier, which is one of his more beloved songs, but nothing else here feels very essential. I don't think it's terrible, but it sounds like what it is. It sounds like something that was put together by people other than Bob himself. So not a great record, not a great album listen. It doesn't really feel like a record. It feels like an outtakes record. So 2.5 stars.
All right, my number 10 is Survival, and I'm at 2.5. It's decent. I don't love reggae. This one, I think the lyrics are really good. It's pretty war heavy here, very political, militant. He's got kind of that take the charge, here's my doctrine kind of feel to it. A lot about uprising, rebellion. I definitely need to listen to more stuff and really dive into the lyrics because it's pretty hard to get all of these albums for the first time and then the second run through and also read along and make notes. So I would like to get more into the lyrics. I got a little bit into them. Musically, though, I don't think there's a lot on Survival that really stands out. And like the lyrics and message are on point, maybe a little bit too on the head at times, to be honest. I just don't really know if these are like the best group of their songs. And I don't necessarily find anything wrong with Survival. I think pretty much everything from like the early mid 70s on is pretty strong. But like when I went to make my top 10 songs list, there wasn't really anything on here that was a contender for me. So I find it a little bit forgettable. And I'm not sure it's as plump and meaty sounding as the other ones. Like I think all of the albums pretty much and my favorite albums have a really good mix and sound to them. Like they don't just sound like wiry tin steel drums and a flimsy bass. Everything's really rich and the production's really good. I think this one isn't bad, but it falls a little bit short to some of their best work in the studio. I do really like Africa Unite. It's got like that little woodwind hook in it, pan flute. I don't know. 2023 continues with me not being able to identify instruments other than guitar, bass, and drums and piano. But yeah, I don't know. This one's maybe just a bit Bob by numbers to me and kind of falls through the cracks. So I got a number 10, 2.5. It's decent.
I'm with Jason on this. I got Confrontation with my number 10. Yeah, it's a posthumous album from Bob, and it just doesn't feel like an album. I think the songs are good, but there's no like continuity between them. Doesn't seem like there's that much thought put into like the track listing. It just feels like 10 songs placed in an order chosen by a studio. I think it's good. I think the songs are good. I don't think there's any like really weak tracks here. Buffalo Soldier was kind of the big single, I guess, from it. And that's never been one of my like absolute favorites of Bob, but it's a good song. Jump Nyabingi, a good one. Chant Down Babylon, I think is pretty strong. But I don't know. Like Jason said, it just feels like a compilation of tracks placed in order to sell records and go to the Bob Marley family or whoever had the rights to his stuff at that point. But it's good, but it's very inessential compared to I think the meat of his catalog. So 3.5 stars, and it's not close to 4 really.
Joe coming out early with 3.5s.
All right. Speaking of the meat of his catalog, we'll start to get into that now as we head into the top 9. And I don't know, a lot of these are almost interchangeable, but this is where I landed. I've got Rastaman Vibration at number 9. This was his first record to reach the top 10 in the US. I will say I love Carlton Barrett's drumming on this record. I think he is playing some really, really cool, interesting parts. His hi-hat rhythm on the opening track, Positive Vibration, is super cool, really interesting part. Even if I don't love the song that much, his drumming on this record really stood out to me. And it's interesting because he was the drummer on previous records, and I never really took note of much of what he was doing, but all over this record, there were like really cool drum parts, I thought. So, I will say his drum beat on Crazy Bald Head too is pretty crazy. Song wise, I don't know. Doesn't grab me as much. You get some synths sneaking in places on this record. But nothing too crazy, nothing too heavy handed, nothing like the keyboards and stuff that were seeping in to the my number 10 Confrontation. They don't really get in the way of the tracks too much. I think the band is pretty hot on Rat Race. You got horns and backing vocals and rhythm section, all very tight. But like I said, I just don't think the songs here work as well. I'd say, even though I'm not a huge fan of most of these records, usually there's like a standout track, like, okay, this one rises clearly above the other ones, or one or two per record that are like that. And I didn't feel that about much here. I'd say if I had to pick some, Johnny Was and Cry to Me back to back, probably the two highlights. But even those don't rise into my like favorite Bob Marley songs. And especially at this point in this discography where I was hoping for like some kind of change up or something different, it was just like more of the same and lesser songs. So kind of disappointing. That's why I'm putting it down here in the lower half, number 9, Rasta Man Vibration.
All right, I'm not too far off from lining up with you guys. Confrontation is my number 9, and I've got it at 2.5 stars, which means I think it's decent. And yeah, leftovers, unreleased stuff. It's not bad. Chant Down Babylon, pretty fun. It's got a cool little bouncy hook to the vocals. You get Buffalo Soldier, like Joe said, which I dig. And never really noticed, which is weird for how my mind operates, because the three of us, all almanac everything like the second we hear it. Never really noticed how many friggin' hits Bob Marley has. Like every album, I was like, oh yeah, that's Bob Marley. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And it's like, damn, Bob Marley just owns this entire genre. I don't know if anyone owns a genre the way Bob Marley owns reggae, really. It's crazy. But I like Buffalo Soldier. Jump, Nine Mingy, pretty cool. Does seem throw together. I do kind of like the little synth touches coming in here, especially like in mix up. And who knows, if he had stayed alive in the 80s with the synths coming in, it probably would have just sounded like reggae with a little bit of synths in it, which is what you get with that song and a little bit of the songs on here. Black Man Redemption is okay. There's some sweet little playing on it. Trench Town, some cool horns. The beats are pretty similar everywhere. I mean, generally that's the case, but especially on this album, it's almost every song almost starts with like that little steel drum floret and then bump, bump, like just done to death. There's some good stuff, but overall probably passable, but nothing really in the trenches. So 2.5 for Confrontation. That's my number 9.
My number 9, I'm lining up again with Jason. So interesting. I don't know if that's good or bad that I keep lining up with Jason. I got Rastaman Vibration. And this one, yeah, it's coming after Catch Fire and Burnin'. And it seems like he's kind of pulling back from the more overt political stuff. He's going back to like the laid back, groovy stuff. There's some big bass on here. Marley and the I3 weaving in and out a lot with the vocal lines. They get a lot more into the mix from here on out after Bunny Wailer and Peter Tosh leave the band. They kind of fill in those backing vocals, which is cool. It's pretty like standard reggae, I think, for the most part, and it's missing like that killer single that pretty much every single other album has. The standouts for me, Johnny Was sounds a little like they bring in some of the sounds of the 70s. There's a nice jazz rock guitar in there. I think a little more standard backbeat, some 70s sounding synths to it. And Night Shift, which mentions forklifts, which it's just weird. I don't think I've ever heard of like an artist mentioning a forklift in their lyrics ever in all the years of me listening to music. So that stood out. I don't know why. But it has a great groove, really good funky backing vocals, and like a little disco-y almost in it, which is nice. I think Marley started implementing and like introducing a little more like outside sounds after the Wailers kind of left, Tosh and Bunny left, and do a little more like contemporary stuff, which I like. I like the big stew, the big mix of sounds. But this one just doesn't have that, couple great songs, and it gets a little samey throughout. So 3.5 stars for Rastaman Vibration.
My number 8, I feel like all of these records kind of are on equal footing as far as like my perception of the public perception of them. I feel like a ton of these records are highly thought of, but I don't know which ones are really thought of as like the creme de la creme. So I don't know if I'm making a major faux pas here, but my number 8 is Natty Dread, and this is the first one without Tosh and Bunny. This one went gold in the UK. It was a really big hit there. It opens with Lively Up Yourself, which I think is pretty much a slog. Not a big fan of that song. Don't think it's a good album opener until you get to the end, and then you get this sweet sax solo that comes in, and it's like, here's a new sound, something different. And it really kind of opens things up. Then you get No Woman, No Cry after that, which is one of his best songs. Really strong melody, strong lyrics, really good vocal performance. And then nothing else on the record really comes close to that track. I do really like the horn arrangements on the title track and on Revolution. Makes me wish the more of the record was like horn heavy. I think he employs the horns really well when he uses them. And I think it's just there's not enough of that or enough of something else to really draw interest. I think it's a little too laid back, a little too mellow, and I think it misses his Whaler counterparts, Tosh and Bunny. I think nothing replaces them. It's just like a hole in the sound, I feel like. And he would, on subsequent records kind of fill that hole a little bit better than he does here. But here it feels a little bit like a vacancy. And yeah, the songs just don't feel as charged. They don't feel as urgent as they do on Burnin' and on Catch a Fire. And for me, this record is basically all about No Woman, No Cry, and that's about it. And that's about all I got from it. So just a 2.5 for me.
All right. Number 8, right? This is where I've got Best of the Wailers. 2.5 still. Decent stuff. So I don't want to hear anyone, we don't hate this. I think everyone is ready for some really cryptic shit, but we're not doing it. Best thing about Best of the Wailers, one of the greatest album titles ever. You just assume it's a greatest hits compilation. So cool. I wish more bands did that. Automatically gets a half star just for coming up with that. Like, it could be the worst record ever, but you're getting at least half star. Soul Shakedown, really like the backing vocal harmonies. Good groove and jam on the Stop the Train. This one seems to have a little bit more power and comes from the gut a little bit more. I think this is the album where it's like probably their best transitional album in their chronology, where it's like they're starting to really find what they're all about. Bob's starting to take the realm a little bit more. Take the realm? No, whatever. Kind of cooler, almost darker and moodier vibe on the song Caution. I really love Caution. Might talk about it tomorrow. It's got a great chorus melody, great harmony to it. And they're starting to get a little more intricate with like their chord progressions and kind of finding their little stuff inside the reggae box. Musically, just more interesting. I absolutely hate Go Tell It on the Mountain. Can't stand it. Any version is probably the most tolerable version. And Soon Come has some cool, like boyish 60s pop kind of charm to it. But I don't think it has like an absolute true banger. I think it's an improvement on the other stuff in this early period. And like I said, a good stepping stone for what's to come. But I don't think it's something that I would seek out to listen to again. So just 2.5, number 8, the Best of the Wailers.
Right. I'm still with Jason with Natty Dread coming in. This one, you're right, Jason. This one is like considered basically the pinnacle. It's either this or Exodus usually, and this one got like 5-star reviews, A's from Robert Christgau, just like across the board. I think it's 181st all time in Rolling Stone, whatever. And I was disappointed when I heard it. I don't know. They're missing. First off, it's missing Tosh and Bunny, and I just don't know if Bob Marley. I mean, I know he was already a good songwriter, but I feel like he took a step back here or something. Even No Woman, No Cry, which I love the live version so much. I don't like the studio version very much. It's so like choppy and like the cadence is so sped up that it loses like the feel and the emotion for me. And it just doesn't sound like, I can't listen to it now because I'm just want to hear the live version. So you take that out, which, that's like the cornerstone of the whole album. And I don't know, it feels more distinctly like reggae than like the albums that came after, and even like Burnin' and Catch a Fire, which felt like they were implementing like more of the outside sounds. This one is just like really repetitive, really repetitive. And like even the melodies are kind of like a step back. It's just sort of like relying on that repetition and that like standard reggae, beat. I like rebel music. It's got some harmonica in there, which is cool. Some big keys, the I3, do some nice call and response. Rebel Music has a cool talk box solo from Al Anderson and Aston Barrett, some good bass work. He also wrote the song. Talking Blues has like an acoustic guitar intro, which is cool. Like, okay, they're changing up, but then it kind of always gets back to like that standard, just like reggae, stayed beat. And there's just not enough like other stuff going on, and the songs just, don't catch me like so some of the later stuff and some of the stuff he was doing with Tosh and Bunny on their later albums. And people basically, when they talk about this album, they say, the material in it is like what reggae was all about, like the political and social commentary, the religious stuff. Like this is like the reggae album. So the fact that it fell kind of towards the bottom for me, or bottom middle, I don't know. This isn't what I think of when I think of reggae. So I guess I don't love the pinnacle of reggae, but um, I do love some of his other stuff. So I don't know. I thought it was a little disappointing. So 3.5 stars for Natty Dread.
Well, I, like Jason, never looked up what the classic Bob Marley albums are, but I got that one way later. So 2023 is the year I become man of the people. Let's just put it that way.
All right, can Joe and I keep this going? We do have one difference already, but we are doing well here. My number 7 is Uprising, which was the last one during his life. It looks like maybe we didn't match that one.
Last one during his life.
The last one he made while he was still alive. I think at this point, I could be wrong. I think he knew he was sick and he was dealing a bit more with his own mortality, and as a result, I think the album ends up being his most overtly spiritual album. For me, most of the album is just okay, pretty middle of the road in terms of both the songs and the sound. But where I only really liked one track on Natty Dread, this one gets the higher placement because I think there's 2 really good songs on it, which are Could You Be Loved and probably his best song, Redemption Song, which I think is excellent. Could You Be Loved has a really, really cool groove, and I like it because I think pretty much it might be the fastest song in his entire discography. His tempos do not get too fast. This one's got a little bit of a pace to it, which I really like. I think it's really cool. And then the acoustic version of Redemption Song is just perfect, just stripped to bare essentials, delivering his message with just an acoustic guitar, shows off how great his voice is, shows off just like his spirit and his soul, and it's just really cool. I wish that kind of like more stripped down acoustic approach was taken on a lot more of his music, because I think his biggest asset is his voice. I think he's actually a very good singer, and I think sometimes the music actually gets in the way of that a little bit. And I think Redemption Song is an example of how that is true, because without all the adornment, it is just a really great song. So unfortunately, the rest of the record doesn't really stack up to those 2 tracks, but not bad. 2.5-star album.
Well, Jason kind of stole my hot take, where I was also going to say I would have really liked to see Bob Marley sing in a non-reggae band, because I think he's a very good soulful singer with a really cool voice. I also have Uprising at number 7, and I'm up to 3 stars now, which means I think it's good. So 3 good recommended Bob Marley albums. It's got to be a success this week, right? Obviously, very spiritual and religious, like Jason said. It's got a really nice, like, cathartic feel to it. I don't really like the low end on the drums on this. It's a bit too meaty and not steamy enough. Kind of sticks and plants too much, like a rock and roll album. Loses some of the bounce for me. I really like coming in from the cold with that cool chorus, breaking in with that like interruption style sing along. Bad Card is playful and fun. There's some really cool quirky chords with the keys and we and them. My favorite song on it might be Work. Has some really cool guitar. Bear with me now. I might be crazy. It's not smoking when I listen to any of this, but I get a little bit of Steely Dan vibes at times, like a little bit of jazz fusion in some of these tracks. I know I'm crazy. I swear Bob was getting high and listening to like Asia and Royal Scam, and it's creeping in here. Like the little guitar flicks in this song, it's like this little quick little hammer on flutter. It's kind of Steely Dan a little bit. Pimper's Paradise is cool. Could You Be Loved is awesome, like Jason was saying, getting that like more like fast, almost police-esque kind of tempo. And almost like a little bit of disco beat at times. I really love this version of Redemption Song. The album's just full of good songs, good vibes, good love. Uprising, 3 stars, number 7.
You're not fooling anyone with 3 stars. Means good. Just stop your lies. You're both out of your mind with that placement for that album.
Do you have a cup with your star rating on it, or do I?
I could have one. 3.5 stars. It's good. I'll never listen to it again. That's how I roll.
I love it. It sucks.
3.5 stars. I hated it. Number 7 for me. Absolutely not Uprising. It's Soul Revolution Part 2, which is second album from 1971. It came out before Best of the Wailers, but I think it was recorded after. But it's confusing. This whole discography was a little confusing. Some of these aren't on streaming. They have weird names, Best of the Wailers, but whatever. I like this one. I think Lee Scratch Perry's production is much better than it is on Soul Rebels here. And I think the vocal harmonies by this point are just really tight, really on point. Riding High, feel like it sounds a little bit like Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Bunny Wailer's falsetto, really high, really nice, really strong. It's a Neville Livingston and Cole Porter song. So I guess it's from the olden days. I'm not really sure. Cole Porter was a little earlier, but I think they take that foundation and make it a really cool song. And a bunch of these songs they redo on Kaya, and it's hard not to compare them to the superior Kaya versions. Sun is Shining, especially, is just so great on Kaya. Here it's a little kind of underdeveloped, but you do get that really cool, I don't know what it is, melodica maybe, lead. So it's obviously, it's a good song that's made into a great song, I think, on Kaya. And Kaya, the song, also later appear on Kaya. Again, it's a little like undercooked here, but I think the songwriting's much better than it was on Soul Rebels and any other stuff. So it shows a lot of development from Bob and Peter Tosh and Bunny Livingston, but it's still a little underdeveloped, I think, but it's getting real close to being like really good. So 3.5 stars. And the production could be cleaner. Again, Lee Scratch Perry's production, even though it's better than Soul Rebels, it's still like not what I want it to be.
All right, number 6, I have got Catch a Fire. And I think this album starts really strong. Some great guitar. That solo on Concrete Jungle is awesome. I wish there was more of that type of soloing in his catalog. I think this record has a lot of that kind of like outside influence that Joe was talking about. You have these like rock sounding guitars in spots. You've got some like R&B and funk type of influence as well, pretty funky in places. There's some cool clav on that track as well. Yeah, I think that's one of his most rockin' tunes. I like it a lot. There's another version of it too on the deluxe version. There's like a version of it without the solo, but yeah, the version with the solo I think is the original one and is the far superior one. Again, though, a lot of the rest of the record doesn't hold up for me to that track. Stir It Up is one of my least favorite of his hits. You know, most of his well-known songs and like the songs that are popular of his, whether or not you would officially call them hits or not, I think are at least decent. But this song, Stir It Up, is just like every issue that I have with the reggae genre, just in a nutshell. It's so slow. It's so dull. It sounds like the band's falling asleep. There's no energy. It doesn't go anywhere. The hook is literally one note. When he says stir it up, it's just the same note repeated 3 times. So I kind of think that song sucks. Sonically, though, this record I think is pretty cool. Like I said, they were bringing in these outside sounds. It sounds kind of like a rock record. The way it's recorded, it has like all this space around it. It sounds like the best like early 70s rock records do. The guitars I think are really percussive. There's great organ all over the place. The bass is still a little too fat for my taste, but it doesn't wreck everything the way it does on the Lee Scratch Perry produced stuff. I think the vocals sound really good on it. I just find it a little samey, a little repetitive. Unfortunately, more of this record is like Stir It Up than it is Concrete Jungle. I like the sound of it. I just don't like the music that they're playing very much. So 2.5 stars.
Number 6 for me is Kaya, 3 stars. I like it. I think it's good. The first 2 tracks don't really strike me as anything crazy, interesting, easy skanking in this version of Kaya. Sounding like pretty good most of the mid 70s to late 70s stuff. Is This Love is just absolute banger. The guitar rules. It's almost got this bluesiness to the lick and a little soloing part. Sun is Shining has some really cool like hazy beat and a little saturation kind of key to it. So like we were kind of joking around and we've always said like a lot of reggae sounds the same. And generally it does. And when you listen to a lot of it, you can start to kind of pick the differences. I'd say it's probably a little more repetitive than like repetitive blues stuff, but there is enough creativity within the walls to kind of make things interesting. There's also some really sensual guitar work too on this album. I think this might be the eBay guitar album. I'm going to guess that I typed best there. I think this may be the best guitar album in this catalog. I like Satisfy My Soul and She's Gone. Misty Morning is really cool, and I like the horns a lot. I think a very underrated part of this band is the horn section. When it comes in, it really lifts and gives a lot of more just drama to the songs. Price is pretty good. I don't really like dislike anything on this. It does run together a little bit, especially towards the end. Running Away has some really cool key licks on it, but I think because it's just got a bunch of really good songs on it, it's a solid album. 3 stars. And number 6, Kaya.
All right, my number 6 is going to be Burnin'. This would be the final one before Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer decided to pursue solo careers. I Shot the Sheriff and Get Up Stand Up on it, so it's got 2 big ass hits. And this one, it's similar to Catch a Fire, I think, in the political themes and the way it sounds. This one, it differs somewhat because I really like Peter Tosh's stuff here. Hallelujah Time and Pass It On might be my 2 favorite songs on it, and those were both Peter Tosh numbers. I Shot the Sheriff. I've never been crazy about it. I don't love the Eric Clapton version. I like this version better, but the way the vocals sound, like just the melody on the chorus is like a little weird, like it jumps up a little too high almost. It always kind of irks me. It's good though. It's fine. Get Up Stand Up has that great vocal hook, and Peter Tosh is like almost a pseudo rap on it, which is interesting to hear. The vocals on Hallelujah Time are awesome. It's strong like gospel influence on it, which is really cool. Burning and Looting has a nice funky creeping groove to it. Pass It On another almost smoky like vocal, great group vocals, and by this time they were just really great together. Obviously I prefer the post breakup stuff, but it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if they had stuck together. And One Foundation has a really nice, rousing organ part on it. And it's a solid album. I just don't love it. I like it a lot. I think all the songs are cool. I like Peter Tosh's stuff, maybe most of all. But, you know, it's very reggae-y. Like it's just kind of stuck in, especially Bob Marley's stuff. I like his stuff at this point, but it just hasn't like expanded out of reggae enough for me yet. And I'm really looking to that. When I went back through all these albums, I just never really found myself listening to anything pre Exodus, we'll say, because I just feel like he got so much better and more interesting, and the music was a lot richer and fuller. And this is like standard reggae. And if you're into like standard reggae stuff, you're probably gonna like, Catch a Fire, Vernon, and Natty Dread the most, but that's not like my preferred. So I am up to 4 stars, but there are better albums.
All right. That is my number 5, Berhane. And I think he started recording it at the same time as Catch a Fire, but then finished it on that tour for Catch a Fire. And so I think musically, it's kind of in this sort of similar place where he's bringing in a little bit of rock and funk and soul type of stuff. A lot of like the bass grooves and stuff on this record reminded me a lot of Sly and the Family Stone Week. So that kind of ballpark. But still obviously very reggae as well. I think the biggest difference between the two records, Catch a Fire and this one, that I can see is the lyrical themes. Get Up, Stand Up in particular, serving as a call to arms, and you also have I Shot the Sheriff and Burnin' and Lootin'. Like I said, a bit more funkiness on this maybe. Tempo wise, I think in a similar place as Catch a Fire, but a little bit more edge here, a little dirtier, a little sleazier. The grooves, that is. I really like the Bunny Wailer contributions on this record. Joe mentioned the Peter Tosh contributions. But I think I like Bunny Wailer's vocals even more than Tosh's. Hallelujah Time and especially Pass It On, I like a good bit, especially the electric piano on Pass It On. Playing these like really gospel-y type changes, I like a lot. But then the record goes out with a whimper. Rastaman Chant really feels like filler, just like meandering and aimless. I don't know. I can see a lot of positive things and I can talk pretty positively about a lot of these records. I don't hate Bob Marley, which I think was the impression going into Bob Marley week. I don't. It just doesn't excite me. It doesn't do anything for me. And kind of like Cram was talking about how it's just like medicine. I don't know if I'd even go that far to say it's medicinal in any way for me. It's just kind of there. So I don't know. There's good things about it, but it still doesn't excite me. It's not a record that I'll ever put on outside of Bob Marley week on this channel. So 2.5 stars for Berhane.
Number 5 for me, Exodus. Kind of interchangeable with Kaya. You can switch them if you want, but I don't want to. 3 stars, which means I like it. Think it's good. Joe, Natural Mystic is pretty cool. I like the mix in the low end a lot, especially with like the little percussion pieces. You can really hear all the little shakers and clackers and all of that coming really thick. I think it sounds great. So Much Things to Say is okay. I do like when they do kind of the over polluted clutter vocals. And I really like the theme in the song Guiltiness. The imagery of like the bread of sorrow and all that, kind of feeling like, reminds me like at the end of Schindler's List, like, did I do enough? Like that kind of just what I feel like Bob Marley is constantly feeling. Title track's really good. Jamming is cool, but I've always wondered, like, since so many of the songs sound the same, and they did a great job, how do they decide like what songs are supposed to get the singles push? Like, it must be really hard on a Bob Marley album for someone to be like, all right, these 2 songs are gonna be the ones. I think it's tough. But I do absolutely love Turn Your Lights Down Low. I think that song is beautiful. Three Little Birds is classic for a reason. I think this is one of their least repetitive albums. I think all the songs kind of have their own little scenery to it. A lot of good tunes, no bad ones. I just don't love it. So I like it. 3 stars, Exodus.
Madness, madness. My number 5 is going to be Catch a Fire, which, yes, was recorded slightly before Burnin', but it's kind of the same time, same year, 73. Burnin' was finished up on the Catch a Fire tour. And on this one, this, I believe, was the first one with Chris Blackwell and Island Records. Blackwell was the founder. He stepped in to take over production. It was him and the Wailers did the production themselves, and it's much better. Like, it's just a huge step up over anything they had done before. This album also has a bunch of guest stars, which I think is where Jason's like of the sounds, sort of the more American contemporary stuff. Wayne Perkins has a couple guitar solos, that really great one on Concrete Jungle, which is probably the best one in the whole catalog. But also he does some cool stuff, even though Jason doesn't like it, on Stir It Up. He's doing like kind of like talk box stuff in the background. So that's like a nice addition, like taking the sounds of America and sort of integrating them into the reggae. Robbie Shakespeare also plays bass on Concrete Jungle, and it's one of my favorite tunes. That clavinet, so funky. Funky as sin there. You get the backing vocals from Rita Marley and Marsha Griffiths. And it's got a little harder edge, like a little bit of R&B, maybe like blaxploitation music, Stevie Wonder maybe coming in and infusing this classic standard reggae that they were dealing in. Slave Driver, really classic Bob Marley sounding tune. Baby We've Got a Date has some sweet slide guitar from Perkins again. And No More Trouble has a little more of that 70s, like almost Santana sound to it, maybe a little Latin flavor, more clavinet, which I love. I friggin' worship the clavinet, and it's all over this album, which is great. So a stronger 4 stars for Catch a Fire. I really like the way they were integrating the new song, or really like the way they were integrating the American sounds and sort of outside R&B funk really into the reggae, and I think it makes a big difference. So yeah, 4.5 stars. No, sorry, 4 stars. 4 stars.
All right, my number 4 is Exodus, and this one was a tough one for me to place. Completely a tale of two halves for me. It's literally split, the first side being focused on religious politics and side 2 being about sex and keeping the faith, but also literally split between songs I like and don't like, or don't like and like, I should say. The first half of this record, probably my least favorite part of listening to the discography, and the second half, probably my favorite half of listening to this discography. Starting with Waiting in Vain, you get 3 of his best songs ever, all in a row. Waiting in Vain, Turn Your Lights Down Low, and Three Little Birds, all really good. Some of his most soulful stuff that he's ever done. Great recordings, melodic, memorable. You also get One Love, which appeared back on the debut, I think, which was reworked at the end of this record. The vibe on side 1, though, is so dark. It's so heavy. The grooves are so repetitive. The one song on side 1 that I think was okay was So Much Things to Say. But Guiltiness, Heathen, and especially the title track were just so hard to get through. For me, the title track, Exodus, 7 minutes, 41 seconds. You can randomly drop the needle in any part of it, and it's the same thing happening. There are stretches of this song that feel like you're just listening to a loop. It drives me insane. So it's tough. It's some of my favorite stuff, some of my least favorite stuff. In the end, it's another 2.5-star album.
Okay. Pretty close to Joe here. I've got Catch Fire next. What are we on, number 4? Number 4, Catch Fire. 3 stars still. Yeah, good call. They're starting to really get Americanized. You get some of those more blues and rock and jazz influences coming in. But overall, even aside from that, there's just a lot more finesse here in the songcraft. It isn't so much just like a jam session where they put melodies over top. It really feels like the parts are helping tell the story this time, creating a little more drama and taking over the emotionality of the songs. Slave Driver is really cool, really coasting along. I'm with Joe. I love Baby We've Got a Date. I think it's really cute and fun and charming, and it's got that amazing, majestic slide guitar on it. Stir It Up, pretty samey. In a Land of More Creativity might be the worst song on the album. I really dig High Tide and Low Tide is really pretty. I love I Want to Be Your Friend, the way he says it and the way it comes early, like a nursery rhyme. It's just so reassuring, and the keys are really nice on it. But that's a bonus track on the Jamaican version. Stop That Train. It's a cool little change up in it. Like, that's not what they usually do with their song construction. It's almost like a different tempo bridge, changing the scenery around. So every song is getting a lot more attention and kind of just fine tuning everything to convey what they want to convey. Like Midnight Ravers is cool. It's hard to talk about these albums because most of the songs go bump, 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 but yeah, this one's a little bit better of that than my number 5. So 3 stars for Catch Fire, number 4.
You guys really got to get down with that 1, 2, 3, 4, not just 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, is it really that much difference? It's just like a little syncopate. Like, come on, like throws both of you into like a weird dead zone. You can't appreciate it.
What's your argument now? What?
It's not that, like, reggae isn't that much. Like, I don't understand like how this is like so different than like normal music.
The accent, where the beats are accented is not the problem. Is the repetition of said rhythm is the problem.
Yeah. I guess I don't know.
You don't think reggae kind of recycles like a lot of the same stuff?
I mean, I was amazed at how much variation and how much like different it was. Like, I really was a little blown away by much of this week, to be honest. And one of the albums that really kind of caught my ear and that I'd never even heard of before was Survival from '79. This one, I've never heard it mentioned ever. Like, in the history of my life, it definitely kind of gets lost in the shuffle between like Exodus and Uprising and the big hits, and it's lacking like that big song. Like, there's no Stir It Up, there's no Buffalo Soldier, there's no Turn Your Lights Down Low. There's nothing like big on this album. So I guess that's why. And it doesn't have nearly as high reviews as the other albums, but this one just has a different sound to it. It's definitely more militant. It's very heavy themes: Pan-Africanism, rebellion, Rastafarianism. It's like a militant kind of thing. Besides that, though, like, the music itself is really like upbeat almost, and like fun and swinging a lot of time. Like, there's more horns, there's even more keys. I think production is better than on any of the other albums. They up the bass and the drums, where it doesn't feel quite as reggae, like indebted to the reggae sound. Like, it's a little louder on the bass. I think it has more like highs and mids to the bass, and you can really kind of hear it and feel it better than on the other albums. The drums are a little louder, I think, and there's still great synth and clavinet work and keys. So Much Trouble in the World, so funky. That steady creeping bass, clavinet kind of going hand in hand. A little bit Stevie Wonder. I've mentioned him before, but I definitely think that Bob Marley and the Wailers were taking a little bit in from America. This was after Stevie Wonder really kind of blew up. So I definitely feel that kind of coming into the music, maybe a little Marvin Gaye stuff as well. Top Rankin really makes good use of horns, adds a lot of color. Love the guitar from Junior Marvin. Really powerful drums. Bass seems a little louder. Nice meaty back end. Zimbabwe has some really cool synth stuff going on throughout. Wake Up and Live has big reverberating bass. One of the few times where you like really hear the bass like climbing higher, and it's really cutting through the mix really well. More great horns. One Drop's another strong one. It's got one drop rhythm and some really good drumming from Carlton Barrett. And I think maybe the songs were getting a little samey. Like Kaya is very similar throughout, and the sound kind of it's gotten into maybe a little rut. And I think on this one, it kind of busts out of that even more and presents like a different sound to it sonically. So maybe that perked my ears up. But I think this is quite underrated and real strong throughout. So high 4 stars for Survival.
Right. I agree on that being an underrated one, and I am still not there. I've got The Best of the Wailers at number 3. Yeah. Best of the Wailers. This one was actually recorded in 1970 prior to working with Lee Scratch Perry, which I think even further illustrates how clearly Lee Scratch Perry was holding them back, I think. This feels like a huge leap forward from those Scratch Perry records. So much more clarity in the recording and in the mix, and it feels much more musical, much more interesting. The piano and organ work on this album especially really shines by Gladstone Anderson and Winston Wright, respectively. Some cool, almost surf-inspired sounding guitar on Caution. And I think the record feels more like the work of a band rather than the 2 previous records, which felt like the work of a producer that was mostly concerned with the dub genre rather than good songs. So I think this is really them starting to shine, even though they had already shown before. You also get 3 Peter Tosh sung tunes in a row in the middle of the record, which pacing wise and sequencing wise, not great, but I like that he's singing some tunes. It's some good variety. Soon Come, probably my favorite of those tunes. His voice isn't as distinct as Bob Marley's, but like I said, a little extra variety helps in this catalog. Not bad at all. As a full album listen, still only at 2.5 stars, but I think individually the tracks here are pretty decent.
Okay. My number 3 is Burnin', 3 stars. Pretty interchangeable with Catch Fire. I like Get Up, Stand Up quite a lot. I think the message is great. I think the way it comes right at you and with its command is really cool. Don't know if musically it's a great opener. I think it's a bit sluggish to start an album, but with like what the song is about, it makes sense. Then I like Hallelujah Time a lot. I like the lyrics a good bit. I like Joe like this version of I Shot the Sheriff a lot more than the Clapton one. I kind of hate the Clapton one. And I feel like this album just comes at you a little bit more. It's got a lot more, heavy hand. Um, you know, it's just got a lot more force and attitude with it. Like he's off the soft like preacher box, and now he's in the crowd, like revving everyone up a little bit. And there's definitely that 70s almost Shaft influence, I think, with like some trippy guitars, like in Burnin' and Luton. So cool key solo it put on, excuse me. I kind of like the 70s-ness of this album in general. A lot more reggae and influences other than reggae. I think you get snippets, like to the intro to Small Axe. I like Duppy Conqueror. I think this might be the best sounding, best mix album. It just sounds really rich and good and beautiful, and his voice kind of cuts through it really good. Big trippy guitars and one foundation. We're getting close to 3.5. Will we get there? But just 3 stars for Burnin'.
All right, my number 3, 1978. I'm going with Kaya. This is, his most laid back, his chillest. This one's all about weed, smoking weed, just weed all over this album. And maybe a little bit about love, but mostly about love of weed. And this one just has like a really nice, laid back, chill groove throughout. I think it sounds really good. Production is fantastic. This, I guess he got the band on Exodus when Junior Marvin came in, and I think there's a couple other changes. And the carryover from Exodus into this, I think 2 best sounding. I think everyone's playing is so great. Really like Junior Marvin stuff. And I don't know, there's just something like how Kramser was saying earlier, like put on reggae to like make you feel better. Like this is like the feel best album to me. Easy Skanking and Kaya. Not the strongest two lead-off tracks, but I think they sound pretty good. And you get Is This Love? We'll share this shelter, my single bed. I think is such a good line on that one. Just a really kind of upbeat, nice song. I think Marley's vocal is really charismatic and rich and, just powerful and like fulfilling. I don't know. There's just something about him on this album. I think vocally, one of his strongest works. Sun is Shining, which they originally appeared on Soul Revolution Part 2. They really flesh it out, and it's really cool. And a little like darkness to it, but some really great drum work. Junior Marvin has some really great melancholy guitar leads. There's some expressive and plangent bass line from Aston Barrett. And then you get Misty Morning, which one of my favorite tracks in the whole discography. Great like rising horn intro, horns throughout, and he's really just like the vocals are so loose, and he's singing along, and he'll like skip a word, and the I3 will like bring it in, and just really great interplay between them. And the backing vocals on this album are just amazing. The I3, incredible. Really love Rita Marley, Marsha Griffiths, Judy Mowat. Just really like raise the level of sound and the richness and the fullness of the music, and really allows, I think, Marley to kind of like improvise a little bit and hold back words and sort of just skank around a little bit. So really like them. I think they're one of my favorite parts of the whole week. And then Time Will Tell ends it in a really cool way. Got that super like high acoustic sound. I don't know if it's like a 12 string or a resonator or mandolin. I'm not sure what exactly it is, but nice to hear like a different sound creeping in. So I think it's just a really good, easy listening reggae album. Nothing too militant or not a lot of rebellion on this one. It's just nice. So 4 stars for Kaya.
Kaya is a really good restaurant in Pittsburgh down on this trip.
Haven't been yet.
It's good. It's Caribbean food. Really good.
We'll have to check it out. All right. My number 2 is Survival. Apparently, he was criticized a bit for Kaya being too laid back. So here you get the complete opposite. Very strong themes on this record, as Joe mentioned, encouraging Pan-African solidarity and supporting the revolution being fought in Zimbabwe, a song which he later performed there in 1980 after the declaration of their independence. Musically, though, not as dark as the themes would suggest, not nearly as heavy and dark sounding as side 1 of Exodus. I think a lot of the album is actually shot through with love and lightness, which culminates on the excellent track One Drop. And in fact, I think this album highlights one of Marley's greatest strengths, which is to deliver important messages in friendly, infectious packages. And also, I kind of agree with Joe about the sound of this record. I think it is one of his best sounding records, if not his best sounding. There's a couple of the early 70s records that have like this great kind of mysterious vibey sound to them. Catch a Fire and Burnin' especially have that kind of like room sound that I think is really, really cool. But as far as like being really full and well balanced, I think this is definitely unmatched in his catalog. I think it sounds really well mixed and big, and the sound of it is great. So I thought a lot of this record was, really engaging, maybe more so than some of his other stuff for me, which just kind of bobs along a lot of the time. But he kept me interested more so on this one, and I am up to 3 stars on it.
All right. I'm going up to 3.5, which means I think there are at least 2 very good Bob Marley albums. Number 2, I've got Rastaman Vibration. Kind of a cool, more low-key style, especially in the drum work here. I think the drum work is fantastic on this album. Almost feeling a bit new wave to me. Anyone say Stuart Copeland? Roots, rock, and reggae. Very cool. Love the drum work. There's a cool, sensual, jazzy 70s slowness to this record, which I really like. Maybe even a little bit Steely Dan in there, a little bit. You get some underlying synth and deeper, thick bass, which illuminates all the songs. So I think it's just kind of got a cooler, more like vibrant, shadowy vibe. Johnny Was, excellent tune. Love the organ keys. And more so on here, I think there's like a roughness in the vocals, which I really dig. I think you can hear it and Want More. And even though it's more somber, I feel like it's cooler and there's passion everywhere. Ooh, the cat fit is really good. The bass is sparser on this album, which I really like. It's not overpowering everything. Night Shift is really cool. It has like this rock and roll swagger about it to me. The way the verse has that sharp lift is awesome. War is pretty good. Album closes a bit repetitively, but overall, I think it's a very good album, and I think it sounds great. I think the just rhythm section's on fire. Rastaman, Vibration.
Interesting. All right, so I don't remember what your number ones are going to be. It doesn't matter. Number two for me, Uprising from 1980, his final album while he was still alive. And I think easily his most consistent songwriting wise. I think it's probably his best front to back. Doesn't quite have that killer run of tracks that Side 2 of Exodus does, but in between Could You Be Loved and Redemption Song, two of his strongest tunes he ever wrote. And plenty of other good stuff as well coming in from the cold with syncopated keys, clavinet's back, really strong groove, and great interplay between the keys and the bass. Pimper's Paradise I really like. It's very dreamy, a lot of R&B influence, especially in the backing vocals and the synth work. And the album's still reggae. It's still got like the offbeat grooves and staccato guitar and organ and those big meaty bass grooves. But I think the variation in the sound really starting to like expand outside the standard reggae stuff. And I think there's a lot of layers here. I think his vocals are immaculate. The I3 and the backing vocals is just great. All the call and response stuff. And something like Redemption Song, which shows what he could have done. And I don't know, I mean, he knew he was sick when he wrote that. And the mortality is all over that song. But it would have been great to have done like a whole album of just like him and a guitar. Because when it's all stripped away, the songwriting there is so strong. Just him and his guitar bearing his soul. And damn shame that was his final track while he was alive. But I think he left his legacy all over this album. It's just a great album. Might go to 5 stars. I have it at 4.5 now, but listening through it again a couple times at the end there, there's nothing that's not excellent. I don't think. Forever Loving Jah. Really strong vocal hook. Could You Be Loved? Love the use of the cuica, that kind of monkey sounding drum that I don't know if it's originally from Brazil, but that's I think where it's most associated with. It gives it a really cool flavor to it. And yeah, great album, 4.5 stars. Another killer album from 1980, just the year that keeps on giving.
All right, my number one, Kaya. The follow-up to Exodus, and thankfully for the follow-up to that record, he chose to follow more of Side 2's template. The feeling here is some of the lightest and breeziest in his catalog. He reworks several tracks from earlier records. All of those are far more inviting and accessible than the original versions produced by Lee Scratch Perry. Is This Love is among his best songs ever, I think. I think his voice is really strong throughout the entire record. I think it's his best vocal album. Satisfy My Soul, I think, was a good song before. One of the better on Soul Revolution. I think it's still a standout here. Time Will Tell is really cool. Of course, was later covered by the Black Crowes on Southern Harmony and Musical Companion. I mentioned survival being more engaging, and I think this is even more engaging than that. The melodies are strong, the singing is strong. Cram mentioned the guitar playing on this record, and I think he is correct. A lot of really cool guitar stuff on this as well. Just a pretty good record. 3 stars.
All right. My number one seems to be one of the consensus best Bob Marley albums. Man of the People, Natty Dread, 3.5. Very good. Lively Up Yourself has that cool little creeping up part on it. I like the little lead work, and I like the horn accompaniment. More craft, more detail. No Woman, No Cry is beautiful. It's light and fun. It has nice storytelling to it. Love the little part about sharing the porridge. Kind of a little jazziness to it. Dare I say steel? No, I'm not going to say this time. A little jazziness to it. And them belly full almost. I don't know. Maybe I'm hearing things or stretching them. Love the political nature of it. Hungry mob is an angry mob is such a great line. I like the guitar work and rebel music. So Jesse has a lot of pain behind it. I think this is their most emotional album. That's why I really like Natty Dread. Like when they were talking about like this is what the reggae is all about. Like to me, everything is kind of coming together. You get some of like the groovy dance vibes, and you kind of just get that sensation that like everything is bad around you, but you're gonna focus on love and the good things and kind of just sink into this groove and let it just take over for you and submit yourself. I think this album is the best version of him expressing his shit. Like it's dark and fucked up, but you just gotta roll with it. Revolution with the horns, just great closer. Closer really captures everything and gives the album closure. Yeah, I think it's just the best version of what they have to offer. Natty Dread, 3.5. I almost went 4, but then when I look at my catalog for everything, I look at all the 4s and I'm like, I don't like it as much as any of these 4-star albums. So just 3.5.
All right. Exodus, my number one, 5 stars for this one. And yes, it's a little backloaded. And I think if it wasn't sequenced the way it was, it would be just like an obvious knockout, almost a perfect 10, high 9.8, whatever. But it is odd that the songs in the beginning, Natural Mystic, So Much Things to Say, Guiltiness, The Heathen, first 4 tracks, they just don't have like any of the stuff, the catchiness that he had demonstrated on, the songs on Catch a Fire and Burnin' and Natty Dread. Like there's almost like he stripped it down so much, like it goes back to like the early, 70s stuff on Soul Rebel, stuff like that, where it's just like missing like the basic like tenets of melody to make them like good songs. And I think he has plenty to say, and I like the lyrics, and I don't think they're bad, but Natural Mystic just doesn't have much going on. So Much Things to Say, I think has a little bit more. Guiltiness has a little bit of interesting stuff to it, and The Heathen he starts to get kind of back in the groove. I love Exodus. I know Jason hates it, but that groove is just phenomenal. That driving beat just over and over. I think it's strong enough to stand up to the extended runtime. Got some real funky horns on it. And Junior Marvin, who came in as lead guitarist, even on the first 4 tracks where there's not that super catchy hook or anything, he's doing some really great guitar work throughout. And Marley's voice is really strong at this point. So despite lacking like if they had thrown Jamming or Waiting in Vain somewhere in the first half, I think it would have been a little bit easier to take. But side 2 is just one of the best sides I think ever on any album, not just a Bob Marley album. From Jamming, Waiting in Vain, Turn Your Lights Down Low, Three Little Birds, and One Love, you have a couple of monster tracks that still get played, to this day, all over the place in popular media. They're all incredible. They're all immaculate. Jamming is so good, just so chill, so laid back, so groovy. The backing vocals are unbelievable. Junior Marvin's doing some great spidery leads all over the place. And then he gets into a track like Waiting in Vain, where he takes the reggae format, really popifies it. There's some like wah wah, yacht rock, almost guitar, and that bridge where it just kind of like breaks through the clouds and this like brilliant, bright vocal, just so surprising the first time you hear it. It's just like comes out of nowhere, just opens the whole thing up, and you get that really nice guitar solo afterwards. Just completely sublime. Turn Your Lights Down Low. Really, I feel like it's not in a reggae groove at all. It feels like a regular, just R&B, like, standard rhythm. And I don't know if he did that anywhere else. Like I was trying to think of like any other song where he changes up the whole rhythm like that. And it just shows that he could have been an awesome R&B singer, because that song rules. I love the little hiccuping backup vocals that kind of going on the back from the I3. More awesome guitar from Junior Marvin. Three Little Birds is that iconic key riff. And One Love is just, a perfect ending, I think, to the album, spreading the message of, one love, people get ready, and yeah, I mean, if one or two of those tracks were on side one, I think it would be obvious that this is, one of the better albums of 1977, one of the top albums of the 70s. But the track listing does kind of make you work for it a little bit. You got to dig through it. But once you get to side two, it's just like, and even if you just start on side two and then flip it over, if you have a vinyl, just start it jamming and then, flip it over. It'll work out better. It's like synchronicity, where it's just like a little tweak to the track listing could make it great. But I still think it's great. So 5 stars for Exodus on number 1.
We see a resequencer in the future here.
I think it needs it. Although, I mean, it's one of those purposely like, okay, first half political, second half love, but like, as Jason so succinctly puts it all the time, that's usually a bad idea.
So there you go. There's the Bob Marley listography. Hopefully people aren't too disappointed in me. Got 2 up to 3 stars. I don't hate Bob. I think the big thing is it's kind of just like a difference in philosophy and like what I'm looking for. The whole thing with reggae is like it's a vibe. You get into the groove and you stay there and you kind of ride it out and you kind of just float along with it and feel it. And I like things that hit you from different angles. The crazy chord changes, interesting melodies, and this just doesn't keep me interested. I think it's part of the reason that I listen to so much music too, is because I always want to hear something different. And reggae is too much of the same. So is what it is, I guess. All right, let us know what you think of Bob Marley, what you think of our lists, and what your own list is. Drop it down in the comments. Make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. Hit the bell for notifications. Check the description for links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, website, merch. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.